Hello, my name is Januchowski, and I'm the president of the Circular Church congregation. I'd like to invite you to our annual business meeting on Wednesday, January the 20th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. At the meeting, we will discuss the proposed budget and vote to approve. We will vote to elect officers and council members to serve in 2021, and we will review annual reports from various committees, including the Health Advisory Group, and we will have an update on a timeline for reopening our church and processes and procedures for that. This is a very important meeting in the life of our church. We need everyone to attend so that we can establish a quorum for voting. The meeting will take place via Zoom. We will open the meeting at 5:45 p.m. to give everyone an opportunity to get logged on and familiar with the Zoom interface. Also, we will have some instruction on how to navigate the Zoom interface at the beginning of the call. The proposed budget and roster of nominees has already been posted to the church website. You can see that information under the annual meeting section of the church website. Additionally, the annual reports will be distributed to the congregation in the coming days. Please plan to join us for the annual meeting. If you have any questions on the materials that are provided on the website or distributed via email, please contact the church office, and if you provide questions ahead of time, we can have answers for you at the meeting and have those answers prepared. We understand this meeting is taking place the same day as Inauguration Day, and we will keep the meeting running smoothly and quickly and stay on point to get everyone to their post-inauguration activities. Thank you, and I hope to see you soon.
Hi, I'm Jane Shealey, Chair of the Mission Fund Committee at Circular. I'm pleased to announce that the committee has decided to approve the application for a grant submitted by Ron Ross. His grant will allow him to sustain and expand his work with the Delancey Street Foundation residents, and he'll be glad to tell you more about it himself. I do want to note that although Ron serves on the Mission Fund Committee, he was not involved in the deliberations concerning his grant application or anyone else's.
Good morning. I'm Ron Ross. I'm here to thank the Circular Mission Fund for a new grant to provide a printer for the photography classes that I have been teaching for 2 years up at the Delancey Street Foundation and all of its men who were there for 2 years. Thanks again.
Good morning, friends. My name is Jeremy Rutledge, and I'm senior pastor at Circular Congregational Church. And it is just my delight to welcome you to a very special service of worship on this weekend when we remember and are inspired by the life of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This morning's service is a little different. The order of things is different. You will hear many different voices. We'll ground ourselves in the words of Dr. King, and we'll be led by a special guest who I'm excited to introduce to you in just a moment. But as we begin, let me say on behalf of our church that whoever you are and wherever you are on life's journey this morning, you are welcome here. And we're always glad to gather in that spirit. Let me introduce to you our special guest speaker. I'm so happy to tell you that this morning we're being led by my friend, the Reverend Dr. Darrell Goodwin. I came to know Darrell some years ago while serving as a part of a visioning group he led for our National United Church of Christ, or UCC. At that time, Darrell was leading our group. He was serving on the board of the National UCC. He was serving as pastor of the church he founded, Liberation UCC in Seattle, and I believe he was still serving as the Dean of Students at Seattle University. And yet you wouldn't have known how busy he was. Darrell was present, focused, and intensely creative. He had a way of bringing the very best out of our group, including a great deal of laughter and the emergence of new and enduring friendships. Darrell was always prophetic and truthful, yet joyfully so, and his vision was inspiring. He is one of the brightest leaders in our national church, and I'm so glad that he is leading us this morning. Darrell has just begun a new role as the Executive Conference Minister of the Southern New England Conference of the UCC. As such, he becomes the first LGBTQ+ person of color to hold that office. I name this historic first, not only in celebration of who Darrell is, but in celebration of who our church is and who we are becoming as we work together toward Dr. King's dream of beloved community. Friends, it is a gift and a blessing to be led this morning by the Reverend Dr. Darrell Goodwin. And as we prepare our hearts for this time of worship, I invite you to join me by taking a deep breath. And as I strike this singing bowl, let us remember all who have gone before us. Let us give thanks for the day that is ours. And let us take heart for the work that is ours to do.
Good morning. Our names are Zach and Morgan Powers, and we will be sharing this morning's call to celebration.
We gather to reflect upon Dr. King, whose life reminds us that church and state must work together for the common good. Laws must establish justice for all, and hearts must change for the beloved community to flourish.
We will do the work of justice for all. We will open our hearts to an ever-expanding vision of community. We will trust the Spirit of God to guide and move us between the present and the anticipated realm of justice.
Dr. King's vision inspires us. We are tied together in a single garment of destiny, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality.
We will work for a world where lives are enriched by difference, where people of different genders, races, and sexual orientations work together in shalom for the good of the whole. We will work for a nation where persons will be judged solely upon the content of their characters.
Dr. King's words challenge us. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
We will listen to the cries of the poor. We will stand in solidarity with those who suffer oppression. We will take as our own the hopes of all who long for full human life. We will create in our midst the beloved community with room for all, justice for all, joy for all, shalom for all. We will listen to the voice of the Christ who stirs about liberating all minds, hearts, and spirits.
Dr. King's life inspires us. I still believe that one day mankind will bow before the altars of God and be crowned triumphant over war and bloodshed, and nonviolent redemptive goodwill will proclaim the rule of the land. I still believe that someday we shall overcome.
We will overcome because of our faith and trust in God. We will reach the goal laid before us without faltering. We will never give up our hope for equality with one another. We will live Dr. King's dream into our reality.
Hi, I'm Evelyn Oliveira, Director of Adult Faith Development at Circular. At the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in Washington, D.C., there is an inscription on the north wall about peace. It is from King's speech, Strive Towards Freedom, from 1958. And it says, "True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice." I light this candle in the name of true peace.
Good morning, friends. My name is Treva. I'm the one on the right in the picture. I want to invite the children to gather closely to the television or computer, however you're watching the service this morning. I wanted to take just some time with you to tell you about the discussion that might have taken place in my house this week between my cat and my friend's cat. My cat Marcell and her friend Zuri were discussing how someone became great. They were both convinced that in order to be great, they just needed to work out. You know, to improve their cat-like reflexes. If only they could run faster, jump higher, and stop quicker, then surely they could be great. They trained hard. Zuri chose to go to an all-terrain training facility. She jumped and twisted, scaling mountains of blankets and pillows. She pushed her tiny little body through exhaustion because surely, to be great, you had to work up a sweat. Surely, to be great, one had to be able to catch a cat toy quickly. She worked as hard as she could, attacking that cat toy over and over again because she wanted to achieve greatness. So much greatness. She kept trying with all of her might. Now Marcell chose to train at home in a more wide open space so that she could run, jump, and charge more quickly. This would allow her to also pay attention to her style, because surely to be great, you have to look good and look good while chasing toys. That had to be the key to greatness. Marcell continued her quest to be great. She worked and she charged and she chased that cat toy over and over. She was for sure going to outlast whoever it was behind tossing that cat toy. These training sessions went on for days, until the wise old cat of the household, Pixie, hollered at them to stop and to listen. She also might have put up their toys so that they wouldn't be distracted. She told them that she knew the key to how a person or a cat could become great. She shared that her great-great-grandmother, Velma, once overheard her family talking about a phenomenal preacher who had come through town. His name was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he preached that everyone can be great. Everyone. Pixie shared that her great-great-grandmother had told her that Dr. King said that everyone can be great because everyone can serve. So serving was the key to being great. Zuri and Marcell were so excited that they didn't need a college degree. They didn't need the fastest cat-like reflexes. They only needed to serve to be great. So Marcell got busy by helping her family cook dinner. It was a delicious noodle soup, by the way. And Zuri got busy by helping her family with the dishes. You and I could be great too by serving and helping others. We can help around the house, or we can help our friends with school. Dr. King was really good at helping people be fair to one another, so we can do that too. We can make sure that everyone is treated fairly. Isn't it good to hear that we can all be great? All we must do is serve one another. Thanks for listening today.
Good morning. My name again is Reverend Darrell Goodwin, and I serve as the Executive Conference Minister of the Southern New England Conference of the United Church of Christ. It is my great pleasure and joy to be able to celebrate this day and the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with your congregation and with each of you this Sunday. Today, in my words and remarks, they're actually going to be the words and remarks of Reverend Dr. King. I think it's important that on this day specifically, we not just highlight snippets of what Dr. King has said, but listen intently to the words that he offered unto us, words that are unfortunately in many cases still needed to have actualization today. When I think about Dr. King's words, I think about this wonderful invitation we have in the United Church of Christ. No matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you, my friend, are welcome here. I wonder, are we called in this moment, in this day, in this hour, to ask ourselves more critically and thoughtfully, are we really welcoming all of God's people, no matter who they are or where they are on this journey of life? Are they indeed welcome here? We may not feel that in the immediate we can change everything that's happening around us, but what we can do is make someone feel welcome here. If they're welcome here, then maybe they become welcome in the grocery store, and maybe they become welcome in the school system, and maybe they become welcome in the town square, and maybe, just maybe, they might become welcome in the places we worship and in which we fellowship. So as you listen to Dr. King's words, listen with your ears, listen with your mind, but most importantly, listen with your heart, and ask yourself, how in these words can you find your welcome? no matter who you are or where you are in life's journey, that the people around you be welcome here. Join me as we talk through and listen to Dr. King's words. The race problem in America. We want to take a few moments to reflect on Dr. King's life and the causes and principles to which he was committed. One thing on which we can agree is that the most pressing problem before King was what we have come to know as the race problem in America. Linda Mayo Perez Williams will read from a speech King delivered at a church conference in Nashville, Tennessee on December 27, 1962.
The problem of race and color prejudice remains America's greatest moral dilemma. When one considers the impact it has upon our nation, internally and externally, its resolution might well determine our destiny. History has thrust upon our generation an indescribably important task: to complete a process of democratization which our nation has too long developed too slowly, but which is our most powerful weapon for world respect and emulation. How we deal with this crucial situation will determine our moral health as individuals, our cultural health as a region, our political health as a nation, and our prestige as a leader of the free world.
Worldwide oppression. Although King's efforts centered on the race problem in America, he believed oppression and injustice were worldwide phenomena. Chris Hernandez will read from an article King wrote for the Christian Century in 1957.
The determination of Negro Americans to win freedom from every form of oppression springs from the same profound longing for freedom that motivates oppressed peoples all over the world. The dynamic beat of deep discontent in Africa and Asia is at bottom a request for freedom and human dignity on the part of people who have long been victims of colonialism. The struggle for freedom on the part of oppressed people in general, and of the American Negro in particular, has developed slowly and is not going to end suddenly. Privileged groups rarely give up their privileges without strong resistance. But when oppressed people rise up against oppression, there is no stopping point short of full freedom. Realism compels us to admit that the struggle will continue until freedom is a reality for all the oppressed peoples of the world.
Nonviolence. How was the struggle against the forces of injustice to be waged? King asked. He was an admirer of the work of Mahatma Gandhi, whose nonviolent methods led to the overthrow of British colonialism in India. King remarked once that Gandhi lived, thought, and acted inspired by the vision of humanity evolving toward a world of peace and harmony. In King's 1967 book, Where Do We Go From Here?, he wrote the following words, read by Bill Simpson.
If we want to truly advance a step further, if we want to turn over a new leaf and really set someone afoot, we must begin to turn away from the long and desolate night of violence. May it not be that the new person the world needs is the nonviolent person. It will be power infused with love and justice that will change dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows and lift us from the fatigue of despair to the buoyancy of hope. A dark, desperate, confused, and sin-sick world waits for this new kind of person and this new kind of power.
Direct action. King was always careful to note that nonviolent methods are passive physically, but strong, dynamic, and active spiritually. Responding to those who questioned his direct action tactics, King responded with these words in his now famous April 1963 letter from a Birmingham jail, which will be read by Susan Dunn.
You may well ask, why direct action? Why sit-ins, marches, etc.? Isn't negotiation a better path? You're exactly right in your call for negotiation. Indeed, this is the purpose of direct action. Nonviolent direct action seeks to create a crisis and establish such creative tension that a community that has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. It seeks to so dramatize the issue that it can no longer be ignored. I just referred to the creation of tension as part of the work of nonviolent resistor. This may sound rather shocking, but I must confess that I am not afraid of the word tension. I have earnestly worked and preached against violent tension, but there is a kind of constructive nonviolent tension that is necessary for growth. Just as Socrates felt it was necessary to create a tension in the mind so that individuals could rise from the bondage of myths and half-truths to the unfettered realm of creative analysis and objective appraisal, we must see the need of having nonviolent gadflies to create the kind of tension in society that will help men to rise from the dark depths of prejudice and racism to the majestic heights of understanding and brotherhood.
Even as King realized, we are all bound together in the struggles for equality and justice, that all life is connected. He also recognized that the road towards these goals would be difficult. In his final address as president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, King offered these words of encouragement, which will be read by Courtney Smith.
Our dreams will sometimes be shattered and our ethereal hopes blasted. We may again, with tear-drenched eyes, have to stand before the bier of some courageous civil rights worker whose life will be snuffed out by the dastardly acts of bloodthirsty mobs. Difficult and painful as it is, we must walk on in the days ahead with an audacious faith in the future. When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds of despair, and when our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, let us remember that there is a creative force in this universe working to pull down the gigantic mountains of evil, a power that is able to make a way out of no way and transform dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. Let us realize the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. This is the hope for the future, and with this faith, we will be able to sing in some not too distant tomorrow, with a cosmic past tense, we have overcome. We have overcome. Deep in my heart, I did believe we would overcome.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll go hand in hand. We'll go hand in hand. We'll go hand in hand someday. Deep in my heart, I do believe we'll go hand in hand someday.
King and the Committed Life. We will be closing today with the words of what have become Dr. King's most famous address, his speech at the March on Washington. Before that, however, are the words Dr. King said he wished to have offered on his behalf in the event of his death. In a sermon he preached at the Ebenezer Baptist Church on February the 4th, 1968, 2 months to the day before he was assassinated, he said these words, which will be read by Jane Claiborne.
Every now and then, I think about my own death, and I think about my own funeral. And then I ask myself, what is it that I would want said? I'd like somebody to mention that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life serving others. I'd like somebody to say that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. I want you to say that day that I tried to be right on the war question. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try to feed the hungry. And I want you to be able to say that day that I did try in my life to clothe those who were naked. I want you to say on that day that I did try in my life to visit those who were in prison. I want you to say that I tried to love and serve humanity. Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for righteousness. And all of the other things will not matter. I won't have any money to leave behind. I won't have the fine and luxurious things of life to leave behind. But I just want to leave a committed life behind.
The Promissory Note and King's Dream. In 1950 America, the equality envisioned in the Declaration of Independence was far from reality. People of color were discriminated against in many ways, both overt and covert. The 1950s were a turbulent time in America, and civil rights activists throughout the 50s and 60s pushed for racial equality. Thrust into the national spotlight in Birmingham, Alabama, where he and an endless countless amount of civil rights activists, including children, were arrested and jailed, King worked with others to organize a massive march on Washington, D.C. And this occurred on August 28, 1963. On the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, he evoked the name of Lincoln in his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, which is credited with mobilizing supporters of desegregation and prompted the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Many people are familiar with the dreams that King articulated at that speech's conclusion. Fewer have, however, heard the speech in its entirety. I'm happy to join with you today, and we'll go down. I'm going to record the whole section, the Promissory Note and King's Dream, over again. So I'm going to start again. The Promissory Note and King's Dream. In 1950s America, the equality envisioned in the Declaration of Independence was far from a reality. Sounds like 2021. People of color were discriminated against in many ways, both overt and covert. The 1950s were a turbulent time in America, and civil rights activists throughout the 50s and 60s pushed for racial equality. Thrust into the national spotlight in Birmingham, Alabama, where he and countless civil rights activists, including children, were arrested and jailed, King worked with others to organize a massive march on Washington. This march occurred August 28, 1963. On the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, he evoked the name of Lincoln in his "I Have a Dream" speech, which is credited with mobilizing supporters of desegregation and prompted the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Many people are familiar with the dreams that King articulated at the speech's conclusion. However, fewer have heard the speech in its entirety. Listen to these words, and again, listen to where you are providing an extravagant welcome in and through your life. I'm happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American and whose symbolic shadow we stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon of light to the millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in the corners of American society and finds himself in an exile in his own land. So, we have come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, Black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note, insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we have come, my friends, to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of this moment. The sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off some steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his full citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundation of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But there is something I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to denigrate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us into the distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny and their freedom inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. As we walk, we must make the privilege and the pledge that we shall march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in motels on the highways and the byways and the hotels of the cities. We can never be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters of righteousness, like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from the narrowness of jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom has left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is indeed redemptive. I say to you today, my friends, I say to you today, that even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are indeed created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the son of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day in the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with this vicious racist, with his governor having lips dripping with the interposition of nullification, one day right there in Alabama, a little black boy and a little black girl will be able to join hands with a little white boy and a little white girl as brothers and sisters. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into the beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that one day we will all be free. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring." And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring in the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from the Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and from every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Friends, we're now invited to take a moment and pass a word of peace. During these physically distant times, we may do that by texting a word of peace, by saying a prayer for peace for someone we're thinking of or the world, or by finding our own way to pass a word of peace or say a prayer for peace. So I invite you to do that at this time as we say to each other, Salam, Shalom, peace. And we also come to a time when we collect the offering with the reminder that all of the money we collect is used to support our church, which is a house of welcome for all people. And it's also used to support our work for justice and peace in the world outside our walls. We're so grateful for all that is given so generously to support the work of the church. And as we collect the offering, I also remind you that we have a COVID-19 relief fund. And if you or someone you know in the community is struggling the financial effects of this prolonged pandemic, you can reach out to me or any member of the staff confidentially, and we have some funds that may be able to help. It's in that spirit that we give, with thanks to the generosity of so many. I invite you to join me in a moment of pastoral prayer. To the God of conscience, we pray our thanks for the voices of conscience, echoing from the past like Dr. King's, his words resonating in our time. Our thanks for voices singing and praying in the present moment, Reverend Barber's, Reverend Blackman's, Reverend Goodwin's, their consciences calling to ours. In a time when the evils Dr. King named, racism, poverty, and war, continue unabated, and the promise he proclaimed, beloved community, is spread out all around us. We see it in everyone who marches and votes and speaks, breaking the silence of complicity in our nation, in our church, in our families and close relations. We give thanks this day for the still small voice of conscience and all who raise it, following the method of nonviolence and bearing the message, Black Lives Matter. And as we pray our thanks, we also pray the many joys and concerns of our lives, all those things we carry quietly with us. And we hold in our prayer, as always, everyone who is grieving today, everyone who feels lonely today, everyone who is sick today, and for the ones caring for them, everyone who struggles with addiction and those who are in recovery today, all of our doctors and nurses and first responders and essential workers, and all the world's peacemakers. God be with them, give them strength, and show us each what we might do for peace. We offer our prayer in the name of Jesus, who appealed to his hearers with a call to conscience. We give thanks for his lived example as we pray together in the way that he taught us,
saying, Our Mother, our Father, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever.
Friends of God, I hope you have been invigorated by the words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. As you leave this gathering together, but never leave the presence of God, know that you are uniquely loved. You are uniquely called for such a time as this, and that you, my friend, can change the world by simply being clear that you are welcoming in all of God's people, and that in you and through you, they might find home. May God bless you and keep you. May God's love shine upon you until we meet again. Amen.